Hey everyone, Zach Wright, founder of Grapevine Software, the virtual office platform for your remote and hybrid workforce to stay connected, informed, and engaged from anywhere in the world. Coming back with our Future of Work weekly report for this week. For anybody who is new here and not familiar with the Future of Work weekly report, what we do is we find the hottest headlines and trending topics happening in the future of work that week, and we will read the articles so you don't have to. We break down the highlights from each article. We share it in the show notes, but then we also give our insights and inputs, and in some cases where it makes sense, we'll provide to you how Grapevine can actually help you solve some of these solutions by using our platform. So if you're new here, go ahead and like and subscribe, and welcome to the Untangled Vines community, which is what Grapevine has here. And if you are returning, thank you so much for being a part of this community and helping pioneer the future of work. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the first article. This first article is research. Employees who can choose between on-site, remote, or hybrid work are 14 times less likely to quit and stay. Now that's the title, so it gives it away a little bit, but the source is MorningStar. If you're not familiar with them, similar to like a Gartner or McKinsey Research, this is what they're going to do. They're going to do the research and then provide the insights without any bias here. The date that this article was published was May 27th. So if you're in the States, that's Memorial Day. We were able to find this yesterday, read it today, and then break down the highlights for you to receive it on Wednesday. So let's go ahead and dive into highlight number one, which is benefits of flexible work arrangements. So flexibility is a key differentiator for employers, according to new research from Great Place to Work. And when employees were able to pick where they worked, they were more likely to report giving extra effort on the job. So those are some of the quotes from the article, or some of the takeaways from the article, and specifically for highlight number one. But let's look at the importance of this based in terms of numbers. So the stats for this section is that employees with flexible work options are 3 times more likely to want to stay with their organization, and they are 14 times less likely to quit and stay. So for people who aren't familiar with that terminology, because there's so many out there and every single month it seems like there's a new one, quit and stay is basically saying, okay, I'm not necessarily going to quit and put in my 2 weeks notice. I still want my paycheck, but what I am going to do is I'm going to stop putting in the effort that I used to do because it went overlooked. It was never rewarded. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the bare minimum, and I'm going to stay under the radar so they don't even think about me. And I still get my paycheck. I don't get reprimanded for not doing anything extra. But whenever 5 o'clock hits, I'm signed out. I'm gone, right? And so, I mean, if we look at this, just the call out here is when employees were able to pick where they worked. Now, it doesn't say when, but I'm assuming that that is included in here. So let's say picked where and when they worked. They were more likely to give extra effort, right? And the reason that I'm focusing on this is because I talk about my thesis paper that I did for my undergraduate a lot. It was the Happy Productive Worker thesis. And in addition to the Happy Productive Worker thesis, I ran across the job characteristics model by Hackman and Oldham. This was back in 1976, if my memory serves correctly. I know it was in the 70s. And basically what they found out there was that autonomy, meaning that the ability for the employee to have a say or a thought into how they complete the work, autonomy, right? That is a key contributing factor to motivation and productivity of an employee. Now, that was 1976. We're in 2024. Another book, and I'm pointing back here if you're watching the video, is Drive by Daniel H. Pink. And he talks about the three areas, which is autonomy, mastery, and purpose, right? And so basically what we're doing whenever we give employees flexible work options is we're giving them a small portion of autonomy, meaning that they get to choose where, when, how they work, as long as whatever it is that they're working on gets completed on time without any delays, right? So these are certain things that we have to think about. And it's not just a theory or a thesis anymore. We're seeing through the studies. And this is one of the things that I love about the future of work is that we are really analyzing what it takes to be a successful company, right? Compared to what we used to do, which is, oh yeah, well, these people are working overtime or these people are doing this. No, we're focused on how we work and we're focused on what we work on, right? And so those are improvements. And it's not just for the employer, it's for the employee, which we'll talk about in the second article specifically on those conflicts there. But let's go ahead and dive into highlight number 2. So highlight number 2 is impact of remote work on employee well-being. Now, part of the thesis that I did was focused on psychological well-being, so I was excited to read this part here. So employees see benefits when working remotely, but workplaces with high levels of trust are doing even better, right? And so this is important because as a remote work advocate or a future work advocate, you would think that seeing this or hearing this, workplaces with high levels of trust are doing even better. You would think that I would say like, well, that's, we don't want to hear that. No, actually that's good, because what that is telling us is that like whenever people say, hey, being in the office is more productive or working from home is more productive or having flexibility is more productive, it all comes down to the level of trust that the company is creating within their employees and their culture. So culture is a huge aspect of this, meaning that if you want a successful organization, if you want a successful team, if you want a successful individual in your organization, the first step is trust. And since we're kind of on a theme here, if you want to read a great book about how to build a team that focuses on trust, you should read The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick Lencioni. Right? You could just Google it. You'll probably find the details that you need if you don't want to read the whole book. But that is so important that they're calling this out, right? Now, if we add high levels of trust with autonomy, meaning flexibility, then, I'm assuming that the high levels of employee well-being will only continue to grow, right? But let's look at the stats in this section just to get a little bit more granular here and see what we have to say about it. So at typical US workplaces, employees working remotely are 27% more likely to look forward to coming to work. So we know if you're more excited to come to work, if you feel excited about coming to work, you're probably going to do better work, or be more productive at least. And then 19% more likely to say their workplace is psychologically and emotionally healthy. So I'm assuming that they're saying if the workplace has high levels of trust, just to close that gap there, then 19% more likely to say that their workplace is psychologically and emotionally healthy. And then the last part here is a statistic mixed with a quote from the article. So 64% of employees without mandates report having a psychologically and emotionally healthy work environment compared to just 51% with mandates. And again, it kind of goes, the reason that I wanted to start with the quote on this section is because it goes back to the level of trust, right? A lot of people that are requiring their employees back into the office when they don't really have a need to. Again, as we always say, we understand that these are mainly knowledge workers, but in some scenarios, other organizations and industries have been able to find a way around it, which we'll talk about in a couple highlights down. But what they're really saying here is that if you're having a mandate to bring your employees back into the office, that's already lowering trust. And I can say that confidently because we've done other weekly reports where we talk about this, right? And so the more trust that you establish with your employees, the better your outcomes are going to be, not only from what we're talking about here, psychological safety, emotionally healthy well-being is increased, but you're also going to see rises in or increases in productivity, increases in collaboration, increases in communication, because they feel like they can speak up. They feel like they're being heard. In most of these organizations that create a great culture, you're going to get rewarded and recognized. So you're more likely to go above and beyond versus just doing the bare minimum or quitting and staying at the organization, which is costing you money, right? So just keep this in mind as we continue to go down this, the rest of the Future of Work weekly report in this episode. So let's go ahead and go to highlight number 3, which is industry specific insights on remote work. So this, in this article, this, what they're calling out here is kind of like, what does the industry that we're about to talk about feel or experience in remote work? What are the benefits? What are the improvements and different things of that nature? So with that, with knowing that, let's go ahead and start with the first one, which is in finance. Remote employees need help connecting with purpose and feeling cared for by their manager. Now, it sounds like they're kind of putting this on the manager, but in reality, if I think about this, this is more of an industry issue than a remote issue. But I think what they're calling out is that if you are in finance and you are a remote employee, then you have an emphasis or a more of a need to understand your purpose. And you have to be, or your manager needs to be more caring. And we always talk about this. There's 2 specific things that an employee needs from their manager to feel like they can do their best work, which is managerial attention and managerial support. And so those are 2 things that are easily adaptable or easy challenges to overcome, because it's all in operational cadences. It's all in structure. It's all in process. If you're a manager, how often are you talking to your team? How often are you talking to the individuals on your team? How often are you having one-on-ones? And what I used to do in my previous role as director of sales operations and sales engineering, I would meet with our sales engineers and I would ask them, what are their goals and aspirations, and how can we tie that to the company's goals? So one, they knew what the company goal was. What was the strategy that we were trying to accomplish? What was the mission that we were coming to work for every day? And then how do we tie those to our OKRs? Because that's the goal setting framework that we leverage. How do we tie that to what they do day in and day out? And then in addition to that, how can I be supportive as a manager? And I did that 100% remote. 2 of our people were in the UK, and then 2 of them were in Florida. And so whenever we looked at this, it was every single Monday we would have a team meeting. And then throughout the week, typically Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday, or Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, we would have one-on-ones I would have one-on-ones with individuals, right? And so what we would talk about is, what do you need from me to feel like you have everything that you need. And then we would also go through the goals that we talked about. How are you progressing on these? And then we would talk about the things that they had going on, as far as like demos that were coming up, or opportunities in the pipeline, and what did they need from me or from people across the organization. And what I would do is, if they needed my help, I would always encourage them to do it themselves, but if they needed my help or I needed to step in, I would be there for them. Right. So they never had a question on what is the purpose of what we're trying to do? What do I as an individual specifically need to do? And then they never question if they never even hesitated to reach out to me if they needed something, right? That's one, building that trust. And then two, giving managerial attention. Three, giving managerial support. And it's all that simple. It doesn't matter if you're in office or not. But I digress because we got to get through this. So in finance, that's what we're talking about: connecting with purpose and feeling cared for by the manager. And it could be that it's just a cutthroat industry, honestly. So that's why I say it's more of an industry issue than a remote issue. Now, the second one is, in tech, remote employees have better work-life balance, but need more communication about the company's future. Now, I read the article. I didn't understand exactly what they meant by the company's future. So was it the strategy for that year or 3 years? Was it the overall vision? Was it, because they said purpose for finance, and future could be purpose. Like, what is our mission? What are we trying to achieve? What is our vision? What is our product vision? All those types of things. So what I would want to better understand is, what does future mean? Because it can mean a lot of different things, especially in tech, because you have the future of your product, you have the future of that individual's career, you have the future of our vision, the future of our acquisition, if we have a plan for that. So many different things, right? So in general, I would say cross all of them off the list and make sure that they're in how you operate as an organization, right? So, and I mean, let's be selfish a little bit for Grapevine. If you need more communication, we have the perfect platform for you, because we have the social intranet that makes sure that you can send out important updates that don't get overlooked. You can have announcements. You can build culture on the company newsfeed, right? There's so many different things that you can do in our platform to make sure that organizations are aligned. And we've seen through the statistics and the studies that we've read that whenever an employee is updated often from their managers, from their executives, then they're more engaged and they're more willing to, again, go above and beyond and put more work in. So keep those updates coming and use a tool like Grapevine to make sure that you're getting it out to the entire company, but also giving them an area where they can respond, ask questions, or celebrate, right? If you want to learn more, check out some of our feature highlights or reach out to us directly, and we'll get on a call with you and have a future of work conversation and how it relates to Grapevine. All right. In healthcare, so now we're going to healthcare, remote employees feel more valued and understood by their manager. So I think this is if healthcare workers are in a remote environment. And that might mean, or that might be because they actually have time to communicate. My wife is a nurse practitioner now. She used to be an intermediate care nurse. And I know that if you told her this, she would kind of laugh, because the manager kind of tucked away in their office and made sure that they were meeting the numbers that was provided by corporate, right? And so maybe there's a difference in healthcare and remote working versus in-person workers working in the actual hospital. So I'm just wondering, I made a note here. I was just wondering who who did they speak to? Because from what I've observed, it's very different from people I know who work in healthcare. But it's good that the remote employees feel more valued and understood by their manager. my question would be, how can we translate that into in person or in hospital or wherever they're working in the healthcare industry? How can we translate that in where they feel more valued and understood? Right? We did it for a quick second during the pandemic when they were essential. They still are, but that's when we finally called them that. So anyway, let's keep going. Let's keep going, because I'm going to try to keep these a lot shorter, 30 minutes if possible, but we'll see. Okay, the last one is in manufacturing. Hybrid employees report more fun, recognition, and a voice in decisions. And so my note here, whenever I was writing these call outs, was if manufacturing can do this, most organizations can too, right? Because if you're working in a factory and then you're able to give people hybrid options, what is stopping you in your organization, especially if you're tech, especially if you're in banking, right? Because I think we'll talk about this in the next article. Jamie Dimon and a couple other people in the banking industry talk about how remote working is bad. So let's save that for there. But those are the highlights for the first article. So employees who can choose between on-site, remote, or hybrid work, or in other terms, have flexible schemas for working, are 14 times less likely to quit and stay. That's the title of that article. Again, it came from MorningStar. Now we're going to go to the second article, which is from Forbes. It was actually published the day that we're recording this, so May 28th. And the title is The Growing Disconnect Between Workers and Employers. And so I wanted to do this one because this is a key aspect of why we're building Grapevine, right? Because we want to make work more flexible, inclusive, and fulfilling for everyone. That's our mission. And that's what we plan to do, not only with our virtual office platform, but also with the type of information that we put out there, i.e. the Future of Work weekly report, the weekly recap, all these things that we're doing, the blog post, all that kind of stuff contributes to this type of article. So let's go ahead and talk about the article here. So the first highlight is remote work and flexibility. So that's what we're going to be talking about. 74% of job hunters desire hybrid or fully remote work options. In addition, employed women are 25% more likely than male counterparts to seek a new remote position. And we've talked about this before on Future of Work weekly recaps in the past, but the majority of women are still considered caretakers. And so a remote working position or job allows them to still stay in the job market and avoid that gap. Because we see this, and I've heard this several times, where in some cases they'll have a child, they'll take the break to take care of and raise the child while the husband still goes out into the workplace. And then whenever they try to go back into the workplace, they have this big gap in their resume and they don't feel comfortable. I've seen this on LinkedIn so many times. They don't feel comfortable putting in their stay-at-home mom or caretaker for child because they think that it's going to be looked at negatively, which unfortunately is the case in a lot of interviews. So this is extremely important for women in the workplace, not to mention other people who are affected. Like we talked about handicapped people or handicapable people. We talk about minorities or people of color. They also experience differences in the workplace opposed to white males, right? So this is something that we have to consider as founders, as CEOs, as business leaders. If we are not offering flexibility, what are we really doing? And in some cases, subconsciously, we are only giving access to this position to somebody who looks like us if you look like me, right? And so we have to consider these things whenever we're talking about flexible and remote work opportunities. And not to mention just addressing the market or meeting the market where we stand. So So let's go ahead and talk about the contradictions in action, CEOs versus employees. And so these are two quotes that came out of this article from Forbes. And the first one is the return to office movement has highlighted the disconnect between executives and their employees. And then Solomon, who is a person that is quoted in this article, I think it's a CEO of a well-established company, called remote work an aberration, stating this is not a new normal. It's an aberration that we're going to correct as soon as possible. I talked about Jamie Dimon before, and it seems that Solomon has the same type of mindset here, that you cannot get done what you do in the office in a remote environment. And what that tells me is that they're not staying up to date with the latest things that are going on in the future of work. Because if they did, then they would understand that there are several tools that they could implement. There are several best practices and frameworks that they could implement. So I always go back to this whenever a CEO is saying that you can't do these things remotely, that in reality, it's just that they are lazy and they don't want to put in the work to adapt to the future of how people want to work. It's not that it's not doable. It's 100% doable. We look at companies like Atlassian, GitHub. I mean, Yelp is out there. We can talk about so many different organizations that are being built or have been built and operating successfully as, in some cases, 100% remote organizations. So if they can do it on a more technical aspect, what is the excuse that you have? And the only excuse that you have is that you are not willing to adapt or learn new behaviors or new frameworks or new ways of working. And what does that do to the employee? It puts all of that load on them. And you wonder why people are leaving because you did an RTO mandate, because you're not taking into consideration what they want. And people will call that soft, but that's not the case. People are telling you what they want. They're telling you that they are going to work better this way. And you're not even giving them the option to do that, or you're taking it away and you're punishing them for something that they were able to do for 2 or 3 years during the pandemic. And now, because the pandemic is over, you aren't willing to adjust or adapt, even though the market and the employees are saying that this is the new way of working, right? All right, I'll take a breath. I'll take a breath there for a second. But let's go ahead and go to highlight number 2, pay transparency. So this is one of the disconnects too. So pay transparency is it's not all about flexibility or remote work, but around 3 and 4 job seekers prioritize job or salary information when considering applying. So basically what that's saying is the majority of people who are job seekers are looking for salary information on their job description. Right. And this quote actually sums it up pretty well. It says, the absence of a salary range in a job description is the biggest reason individuals will forego submitting an application, meaning that if there is not a salary range on the job description, then you're already canceling out some of the best people who would have applied if there was a job salary range in there. And let's think about why. Right? Every time that somebody tells me that, no, we got to be back in the office, or we got to do it this way, or I'm not going to post job salary because XYZ, whatever reason it is, put yourself in their position. If it was you who was applying to this position, and let's say that, so I do RevOps consulting. And so let's say that it's a revenue operations position, and I applied to it because I think I'm a good fit. It matches what I'm looking for, blah, blah, blah. I go through 6 interviews. So that takes several times. Let's say that each interview is 30 minutes to an hour. Let's just say it's all an hour. That's 6 hours of my time. 2 more hours, that would be a full work day. We get down to it, and the salary is $60,000, right? For an entry level position, that could be good. But for somebody like me who has been a director in this position before, or a strategy staff executive, that doesn't match what I'm looking for. So I just wasted 6 hours of my time, and you wasted 6 hours of your time because you didn't put the job salary in there. So just from that perspective, a job salary on the job description is going to be beneficial to you too. So we have to think about it like that. What is it? What would you want as an applicant to this position? And then from the company perspective, wouldn't you want people to kind of reject themselves instead of you getting a lot of BS applications or overly qualified people who aren't going to match what you're able to offer? Especially, I think about this as a startup. Whenever we start hiring people, if we put the job salary on there, then we're going to get people who are okay with that job salary. So now we can focus on the interview. We still need to talk about it because it's an important aspect of the position, but we have to think about that. But just to continue on this with pay transparency, this and it's only going to get worse on this on this breakdown. But half of job listings still neglect including salary disclosures. But even worse, this is when I read this, it was very frustrating. Companies are making a mockery of laws because now in some cases, in some states, it's a law that you have to put a job salary range in there. But some companies are making a mockery of the law by posting absurdly wide ranges, such as $0, which first of all, that's illegal to offer someone $0, to $500,000. What I will say about this is that companies who do this, they're doing you a favor because they're telling you who they really are, right? That is a major red flag whenever you're trying to apply for a position. If you see 0 to 500,000, don't even waste your time. Right? So companies who are not adapting to the future of work or the needs of employees or hearing the voices of what this generation or the next generation is saying, they're going to be the ones that fall behind. And then they're going to have to adapt. And I don't have to remind you of the Blockbuster story whenever they realize that, oh, maybe streaming or online orders is a good thing. It was too late for them. Don't let it be too late for you. But as a candidate, that's a red flag. Avoid them at all costs. Okay. This is a good episode, right? Highlight number 3, candidate experience. So let's see what's happening right here. Nearly 50% of workers feel the job search process is impossibly difficult and they have to jump through excessive hoops for little payoff. Research by Josh Bursum Company and AMS found that the duration for global hiring is at an all-time high, which the report calls unsustainable if companies are to remain competitive. Now, I think basically what they're saying here is that the majority of interviews right now are asking so many people to do so much work before they're even hired, 1, and then 2, before they're even paid for anything. And so what they're saying here is that companies that continue to do this, 1, it's going to be unsustainable, meaning that they can't continue to do this. It's going to take a lot of time. It's going to take a lot of effort. It's going to waste people's time in the company. It's going to waste people's time applying to the company. And they're going to lose out because they're no longer going to be able to remain competitive. Because if you compare this, right, if an organization has a really solid interview process and they're able to narrow it down to 3 interviews and get what they need from the person applying without all the added homework, so to speak, then you compare that to a company who does 6 to 9 interviews with projects in between, like, it's easy. They're going to go with the person or the company that did 3 interviews and understand what type of people that they want to speak to, right? So, or what type of people that they want to bring into their organization. So, if you're going to do this, you got to think about it. Like, what is the value, and is it taking away top talent? But then let's look at this part right here. So the stats for this section is 40% of job seekers in the US were ghosted after the second or third round interview. And then 41% were ghosted after receiving a verbal offer from the company. What is going on? So I've worked in the recruitment and staffing industry, and so I might be able to add a little bit of color here, but that always happened before the interview ever occurred, or maybe the first interview. And I can kind of understand a little bit if it was at that place, because there's so many candidates, there's so many applications coming through. But whenever you get to the point of actually interviewing someone, it takes about 5 minutes to send a pre-templated response to that person if you know that they're not going to get the job. So you simply, and you probably have an application tracking system, you probably have something that like a CRM system, but for recruiting, that you can go in and respond to that person with that template. At least they know that, hey, okay, I am rejected because there's other candidates that might be a better fit. Now, that person can always reply and say, do you have any tips for me for a better outcome on the next approach, or that I can provide myself to become a better interviewer for the next interview that I get with another company? Now, that might be a little bit harder to respond to if you have several different applicants, but the 40% of job seekers in the US ghosted after second or third rounds of interviews, that's pathetic. By that time, for that position, you've probably dwindled it down to maybe 10 people. It depends on the size of the company, right? And it depends on the size of your recruiting or your HR function that specifically focuses on talent acquisition. But again, all of these things that make work better is going back to this question: how would you want to be treated? What experience would you want to experience during this process? And if you look at your organization's processes and things like that, and you see that, hey, I would not like that, it's probably time to upgrade your process. So before we wrap up, I just want to go to this last part, which is why leaders need to course correct. So smart companies have people in place recognizing the pivots and behaviors and addressing everything in real time, said Lori Aiken, Vice President of Human Resources at Indeed. And then the last part here is the leaders that meet workforce expectations will win the war for talent and their companies will thrive. I'm going to read that again. The leaders that meet workforce expectations will win the war for talent and their companies will thrive. How do you meet those workplace or workforce expectations? You adapt, you grow, you learn. Even if that means that you have to adapt to something that you've never done before. You could be a traditional 100% in the office type person, but that doesn't actually matter when the market and the employees are telling you something different. And if you don't listen to them, then you are going to get left behind. and you have no one to blame except for yourself. And the problem that I have with this, with people saying that remote work or flexible work is morally wrong, or whatever we talked about earlier from Solomon or Jamie Dimon saying that remote work, you can't do it and be productive and innovative. You are putting everything on the employee and you're giving them nothing in return. So either do one, if you're asking them to return to the office, make it a better experience. Because if you're asking them to return to the office and nothing is changing and it's going back to pre-pandemic operations, they're going to go somewhere else. Because one, they can work flexibly, and two, they actually work for somebody who cares. Right? So this is the Future of Work Weekly Report. I feel like I did a lot of preaching, but this is how passionate we are here at Grapevine about the future of work, because we understand that the future of work is flexible. We understand that that includes the option to work remote. And remote does not only mean work from home. It means that you can work from home, you can work in a coffee shop, you can travel while you work. The only thing that matters is, are you getting the things done and not slowing down other people? And if that's the case, who cares where or when you work? Right? Okay. Thanks so much for watching the Future of Work Weekly Report. Like and subscribe to keep us moving up in the algorithm. And please share this with anybody who you think would be interested in learning about the future of work from these weekly reports. We drop them every Wednesday, unless we get caught up in startup land. But thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you on the next episode.